Tober Charlie gently used the knife in the bottom of the boat 2 times. The bottom of the boat will appear a hole. When Tober Charlie saw Demeter appear outside the ship, he hurriedly used his foot to plug the hole in the bottom of the ship. While Tober Charlie was talking with Demeter, a warship suddenly sailed to their side of the ship. Tober Charlie and his teammates were worried that the other side would pose a threat to them, and they all began to change to avoid the Navy's search. Black Brother, in order to make himself look like a fisherman, he picked up a worm pretending to be wearing bait. As a result, the black boy was so nervous that he popped the worm into the officer's head, but the officers thought the black guy was really a fisherman. Then the officers looked at Demeter. Demeter hastily pretended that he was seriously fishing. As a result, Demeter threw the fishing rod out with great force, not expecting it to fall into the sea. At this awkward moment, Demeter suddenly thought of a good idea. Demeter hurriedly raised the handle of the fishing rod and pretended that it was a telescope. But the police officers did not continue to suspect Demeter. When the army's ready to withdraw, the officers found that Demeter had already entered the ladies' room. The officers realized that he had been tricked, so he ordered to shoot Demeter. Demeter also changed out of her costume and grabbed a weapon and attacked the officers. Tober Charlie and his teammates also grabbed their weapons and started to fight back. Tober Charlie told the team to retreat first. He would stay and continue to fight. The team immediately jumped into the water and fled when they heard the command from Tober Charlie. Tober Charlie took up his gun and fired at the enemy. In just a few minutes, Tober Charlie was surrounded by fallen bullet casings, and the casings had piled up into a small mountain. The enemy also cooperated with the line fell into the water. The enemy fell into the water. Posture is also very fancy. By the time Tober Charlie ran out of bullets, the officers thought he was on the verge of victory. But Tober Charlie pulled out a grenade, which he threw precisely into the officer's mouth with a violent explosion. The enemy was all but eliminated. Tober Charlie was also swept up into the air by the impact of the explosion, and he hastily opened his parachute. Fortunately, Tober Charlie hung on a tree, but he calmly took out his steel knife. Then Tober Charlie pulled the rope after the steel knife actually turned into a chainsaw. He successfully cut the tree branch to complete the fall. Tober Charlie suddenly fell in the air like a javelin stuck in the ground. Teammates rushed to pull him out. Tober Charlie and his teammates, in order to successfully rescue the hostages, they dived to the bottom of the sea, but Demeter released a stench, which surfaced with the bubbles and made the soldiers fell into the sea. Then Tober Charlie and his teammates successfully infiltrated the enemy's base. Tober Charlie is trying to break in through the iron gate. He took out a small steel knife to cut the wire, but when Tober Charlie gently pulled the barbed wire, gate fell down. Tober Charlie sneaks into the cell where the hostages are being held, and he tries to get the key out, but Tober Charlie accidentally stabbed the guard in the face. Fortunately, the guard was in a dream and didn't want to wake up. Tober Charlie managed to get the key, but the key was thrown outside the cage by Tober Charlie. The hostage had to rush out and pick up the key. Just as the hostage used the key to open the cell door, the guard suddenly woke up, but the hostage gave up the pistol and picked up the fly swatter and knocked the guard out. Unexpectedly, the guard accidentally hit the alarm on the wall. Then a large group of soldiers came here. Hostages used weapons to send enemies flying immediately on the wall. Tober Charlie also used his gun to shoot the enemy wildly. Soon the enemy was piled up into a small mountain. Despite this, the enemy surprisingly put a bullseye directly on his body. Tober Charlie did not worry about running out of bullets. He casually grabbed the shells and threw them hard at the enemy, who would fall down with him. Demeter broke through the enemy with the hostages, but the next moment, a soldier opened the door and he looked around suspiciously. Tober Charlie draws his bow and shoots an arrow at the soldier, but the soldier unexpectedly dodges the attack. Tober Charlie did not give up attacking the soldier. He hurriedly aimed at the soldier and shot another arrow. The arrow was dodged by the soldier again. Tober Charlie's archery skills were really bad, and all the arrows he shot were accidentally dodged by the soldier. At this time, Tober Charlie found that he had run out of arrows. When the enemy saw the extra arrows behind him, he was so scared that he screamed loudly. So the soldier hurriedly loaded the magazine and prepared to shoot. Tober Charlie picked up a rooster, and then he continued his attack on the soldier. Then the rooster flew out at once. In the rooster's scream, the soldier was killed by Tober Charlie. Finally, the rooster laid an egg. The curly-haired man picked up the bazooka and knocked on the door. Then the curly-haired man quickly backed up and prepared for battle. He waited for the enemy to open the door and then knocked him out on the ground. When the curly-haired man saw the other soldiers behind him, he immediately attacked. Almeida was aiming her sniper rifle at the enemy's head, and the next moment she knocked him down with a hammer. The enemy grabbed a banana and attacked the curly-haired man. The curly-haired man struggled for a few days before he realized that the soldier was only holding a banana. So the curly-haired man opened his mouth and took a bite, then punched the soldier and knocked him to the ground. When the enemy used artillery shells to bombard, that's when Tober Charlie's teammate Mike quietly stabbed the shell with a bamboo pole. Then the shell hit the sky and fell vertically, causing the enemy to be blown away on the spot. Tibber Charlie rushed into the enemy's base and fought directly with the leader. Tibber Charlie slashed his sword across the Kindle, but the Kindle didn't change and his sword broke into 2 pieces. Without a weapon, Tibber Charlie had to run away immediately. At the critical moment, Tibber Charlie's teammate Tom arrived in time to give Tibber Charlie help. Tom grabbed the rope, handsomely jumped down, but jumped into the fireplace. But Tom came out again as if nothing had happened. Because Tom's clothes are special material, so the protection is very strong, will not break. Then Tom and the chief of the 2 picked up the lightsaber, directly began to fight. But Tom was soon defeated by the chief, so Tom hand picked up the blower, stabbed into the chief's mouth, and began to inflate. The chief picked up the iron bar to Tom, smashed down hard. The result of the iron bar are hit out of the human form, but Tom was not injured. Then Tom picked up the fire extinguisher, sprayed the chief, rousing into an ice sculpture. Tom gently pushed the chief, fell to pieces. Finally, Tibber Charlie managed to save Bean. Bean was a photographer and wanted to take a picture of Tibber Charlie and Demeter as a souvenir to thank him. As a result, Bean kept backing up to find a suitable angle for the photo, but Bean falls off a cliff and loses his life. At the end of the movie, Tibber Charlie and Demeter are together and live happily ever after. This mechanical dog has consciousness. It actively identifies trustworthy people, but it was pierced by a steel pipe. The mechanical dog intrigues Miles. He gently calmed the dog down. He then helped the dog pull out the steel pipe because Miles is not aggressive, so the mechanical dog became dependent on Miles. It marked Miles as a whitelist. Then he sent Miles a maintenance message. Miles tried to hide the robot dog, so he dragged the robot dog into the container. He checked his phone for prompt. Then he skinned the robot dog. The robot dog opened its back. A full set of repair tools appeared. Miles rushes to make repairs. He used a motorcycle shell to repair the dog's body. He also added a large bucket of gasoline to the dog. The robot dog quickly recovered.
Whoa, what are you doing? You sniffing me out?
Miles helped the dog to remove the muzzle. The dog already thought of Miles as its master. Soon he was happily playing with Miles. But how did the robot dog get hurt? Miles and his companion were playing mountain biking. His companion played a prank. He secretly filled Miles' gas tank with water. The motorcycle suddenly went out of control when Miles was showing. He fell directly to the ground and his companion left without him. Miles was leaving when he suddenly heard a strange scream. He immediately escaped on his bike. The next second, a robot dog suddenly rushed over. Fortunately, Miles dodged in time. He managed to dodge the attack with his bike skills. Then he accelerated up the hill. The robot dog was in close pursuit and jumped up. As a result, Miles landed perfectly, but the robot dog lost control and fell down the hill. It crashed hard into the grocery pile. The dog's body was pierced by a steel pipe. Miles decided to take pity on the robot dog, so he saved the robot dog. At that moment, his girlfriend Sarah suddenly came to him. The robot dog thought she was a bad guy. It was ready to launch an attack. Girlfriend shouted loudly. Fortunately, Miles arrived in time. The dog stopped attacking. It also whitelisted Sarah. They didn't know they were being watched by a drone. It's a robot dog with a heart. It can hack into the system by turning its eyes and make its owner wealthy and free. When Miles went to pay for the gas, he found out he didn't have to pay. The dog paid for us. Obviously, he did. Then the mechanical dog hacked into the cash machine. The money immediately came out. Miles knew it was the robot dog's help. The 2 men couldn't help but laugh. They didn't have to make their own money anymore, but they were worried about people finding out, so they hide in a deserted place. Sarah was drawing on the wall. The robot dog emits a laser. The painting was immediately full of technology. Then the dog held out the fingerprint controller. Miles gets it and presses it directly. The robot dog immediately played the picture. So it is not a cute pet, but a ferocious fighting machine. After the robot dog escaped from the lab, the expert immediately sent a drone. He found but did not bring the mechanical dog back, and Miles was also used as an experimental subject. That's when Sam finds Sarah and confesses his love, but Sarah rejected him on the spot. Sam punched Miles instead, so Sam was jumped by the robot dog to the ground. He was dragged to Miles by the robot dog. The kind-hearted Miles doesn't mind. Miles told the robot dog not to hurt Sam. The dog immediately added Sam to the white list, but this is a big problem. At night, Sam and his companion came to take revenge. He spilled gasoline all over the floor. Because Sam was already whitelisted, the robot dog didn't attack. Instead, Sam spewed fire at the dog. The dog's system was paralyzed by the fire. When Miles and Sarah came back, they found the robot dog had been burned into scrap metal, but the dog's eyes were still glowing. The 2 men rushed to carry the dog to the car. They arrived at the repair facility. They used their clothes to wipe the dog clean. Finally, they repaired the wiring. The 2 men worked for a long time. They finally fixed the robot dog. Just need to wait for the system to be restored. But the lab employee found the place. He wanted to take the dog back, but the dog had just been muzzled. The system was just finishing up. The robot dog woke up and knocked the enemy out of the way, and then it crashed through the door and stormed out because it wanted to go to Sam to seek revenge. At a party, the robot dog appeared out of nowhere. He yells at the crowd. The crowd runs away screaming. Sam panics and hides under a car. The dog kept attacking with its sharp claws. Sam had to grab a flamethrower and shoot flames. The dog was about to be roasted to a crisp, but suddenly, the fuel was gone. Sam directly frowned. Fortunately, Miles arrived in time. He was able to stop the robot dog's attack, and then a lot of drones came from the sky. It unleashed 100,000 volts on the dog. Soon the robot dog was done. Miles and Sarah were also taken back. The expert forced the robot dog to attack Sarah. He wanted Miles to give up his fingerprint reader. Sarah immediately took out a laser pointer. She drew the shape of a feather in the air. This awakens the robot dog's memory. The dog throws off the control line in anger. The experts all escaped, but suddenly, the military appeared and arrested them. The military also surrounded the entire lab. Miles and the robot dog worked together. They broke out of the encirclement and escaped. They just managed to escape. The military helicopter came over. They were in hot pursuit of the two men. The two soon came to a cliff. They had to jump off. Miles broke his arm. He fell to the ground and couldn't move. Miles told the robot dog to run away. Although the robot dog did not want to leave Miles, but it obeyed and ran away. Drones kept attacking. Soon the dog is blocked by the mountain. It confirmed that it would not hurt Miles. The robot dog turned on its intelligence mode. A loud sound and then exploded directly into a fireball. Miles saw and fell to the ground. And Miles, to honor the robot dog, he adopts a real dog. Miles and Sarah live a peaceful life. The boy suddenly slipped and fell. He fell into the pool, which was nearly 10 meters deep. Jesse quickly lost consciousness and sank to the bottom of the water. Keiko, an orchid that had been hungry for 3 days, found the boy. Keiko opened his mouth and bit Jesse's body, but who would have thought that Keiko did not swallow Jesse? Instead, Keiko brought Jesse to the surface. Then Keiko slowly pushed Jesse with his mouth, gently pushing him back to the shore. When Jesse woke up, he found that the fierce orca had saved him. Jesse was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Jesse wanted to repay Keiko for saving his life. Jesse runs to the fish store to help out in exchange for a pack of delicious small fish, because Jesse wanted to treat Keiko to a meal. But strangely enough, Keiko didn't eat the fish. Instead, Keiko took the fish back to Jesse. Jesse thought Keiko didn't know how to eat the fish, so Jesse picked up the fish, imitated eating it, and gave Keiko a demonstration. But Keiko shook his head, and then Keiko opened its big mouth. Although Jesse was scared, he threw the fish into Keiko's mouth. Keiko happily spurted out a jet of water. Jesse saw that there was no one around and he suddenly became bold. Jesse reached out his little hand to touch Keiko. The result was an incredible scene, never letting anyone near Keiko. This time, Keiko not only approached the boy Jesse of her own accord, Keiko's face also showed an expression of enjoyment. When Jesse got up to leave, Keiko didn't want to let Jesse go. Keiko kept following Jesse, and Keiko flashed his white belly. Keiko also waved its fins to say goodbye to Jesse. Jesse couldn't believe it, so he hurriedly switched to his right hand to try. Jesse didn't expect Keiko to understand right away. Turning around, Keiko did the same thing. This scene was amazing. Jesse reached out his hand and spun in place, and Keiko rolled in the water. Jesse stuck out his tongue and made a face. Keiko imitated it too. Jesse opened his mouth wide and burst out laughing. At night, Jesse couldn't sleep at home. All he could think about was Keiko's face. The next day, he went to the oceanarium to see Keiko's performance, but Keiko didn't show up. After Jesse waited for a long time for the show, it turns out that since Keiko is fierce by nature, no one can tame it, so Keiko couldn't perform, and Jesse had to leave disappointed. But when Jesse was about to go home, he suddenly heard Keiko scream. Jesse rushed back to the oceanarium and he saw an angry scene. This orca wouldn't perform for the visitors. People are ready to serve it to the dinner table. Keiko, the orca, screamed in pain as she struggled desperately to get out of the net. Jesse saw the desperation in Keiko's eyes and Jesse decided to save Keiko. Jesse secretly cut the rope of the fishing net. When the master was not paying attention, Keiko took the opportunity to dive under the water and escape temporarily. But Randolph found Jesse.
Saw what you did. I'm sure Willie's grateful.
In order to save Keiko's life, Jesse suddenly thought of a way. Jesse thinks that if he can't get Keiko to perform, Keiko could change her fate of being eaten. So Jesse found a trainer and he started to learn how to train Keiko with his hands. As long as Keiko performed well, Jesse would give Keiko a fish as a reward. The unbelievable thing happened. Keiko did very well in front of Jesse. In just 2 days, they worked very well together. When Jesse waved his hand, Keiko jumped out of the water. When Jesse gives a command, Keiko does it brilliantly. Keiko does not show any cruel behavior. So Keiko will have his first performance. If Keiko can't finish this performance, not only will he not be eaten, Keiko will also have a bigger pool. But if there are no surprises, there will be soon, because the kids kept banging on the glass so much that Keiko was terrified. Keiko comes to Jesse's side and opens her mouth to wail for help. Jesse rushed to comfort Keiko, and Jesse told Keiko not to ruin the show, but Keiko shook its head. It said it didn't want to perform anymore. Keiko dived under the water, but the loud sound of the kids banging on the glass soon frightened Keiko. Keiko started banging hard on the glass, causing the kids to run away screaming. The show was ruined and Randolph was furious. Jesse was also very disappointed with Keiko. Jesse doesn't want to meddle anymore. Jesse says goodbye to Keiko, turns around and leaves. Keiko let out a sad cry, but the next moment, the other orca outside actually responded. It was only then that Jesse realized that the orca outside was Keiko's family. Sparks suddenly emerged from the pool, and Jesse rushed over to check it out. But what Jesse saw was a shocking sight. This killer whale, because he messed up the show. Randolph then sent someone to wreak havoc by draining the pool. Randolph intended to kill Keiko, the orca, alive with thirst. The boy, Jesse, didn't stand idly by. He quickly called the maintenance crew, but it was too late. The ruptured hull was beyond repair. To save Keiko, Jesse offered to send him back to the sea. With the help of the maintenance crew, they got a crane. Then they put the fishing net into the pool, but Keiko refused to go in because it was something that would make him lose his freedom. Finally, Jesse jumped into the water to help Keiko. Jesse helped Keiko get into the fishing net. Then they transported it to the sea by truck. But halfway there, trees blocked the way. The repairman had to choose a detour, but Keiko's body gradually dried up due to the long dehydration. Jesse kept stroking Keiko. Jesse wanted Keiko to persevere. Finally, the car came to the beach, but Jesse did not respond. Just then, Randolph suddenly came with his pursuers. Both sides immediately engaged in a fierce struggle. Gradually, Keiko woke up. Keiko desperately twisted her body and slowly swam towards the sea. But Randolph didn't give up. He found a fishing boat. Randolph laid a fishing net in the sea mouth in advance, causing Keiko to be trapped in it once again. Freedom is not far away. Keiko desperately tried to break through the fishing net, but it could not do so. Keiko could only hover in place. Jesse saw this scene and he rushed up to the dam. Jesse yelled and screamed, hoping Keiko would come to him. Keiko got rid of the fishing net and Keiko swam towards Jesse. Then Jesse cried and said goodbye to Keiko, because this separation could be forever for them. Jesse held back his grief and he ran all the way to the dam. Jesse shouted for Keiko to believe in him. Then Jesse waved his hand and Keiko started sprinting. Then Keiko jumped. A scene that shocked Randolph. At the end of the movie, Keiko manages to get back into the sea. Keiko jumped out of the water and thanked Jesse in this way.
This may be the least scary ghost you have ever seen, and after watching it, you will also want to hug him heartily. The story goes back one day. Jack died unexpectedly. During the moving process, Mary covered him with a white cloth and left the morgue sadly. The spooky thing is that shortly after the girl left, the white cloth was suddenly propped up. A human figure finally came out of the morgue slowly. When it passed by the doctor, everyone did not notice the ghost's presence. Jack then realized that he had become a ghost. Not long after, a glowing door appeared at the end of the corridor. Jack could be reincarnated if he walked in. But Jack did not do that because Jack couldn't let go of his girlfriend Mary. He wanted to find her. Jack came home and looked at the photo of himself and Mary. It was as if nothing had ever happened. That's when Mary came back, but she couldn't see Jack at all. Jack thought Mary would be sad about her death and cry. Instead, Mary was unusually calm. She calmly washed Jack's morning coffee cup and calmly threw away Jack's used writing paper. Then Mary began to eat the lunch they had prepared this morning. Mary still ate calmly, but Mary didn't stop eating for a long time. It was not until the two-person portion made Mary vomit that Mary would stop eating. So the silent grief is the most painful. Jack looked very heartbroken but could not do anything. At night, Mary finally began to cry. She lay in bed crying very painful. Seeing this scene, Jack would like to go up and hug Mary, but Jack is a ghost to do nothing useful. Jack could only watch him cry himself to sleep. People always say not to be too sad about the death of loved ones. Time passed slowly. Mary finally let go of her thoughts of Jack and looked at the future again. She changed the sheets from their old bed. Mary tried to erase the memory of her boyfriend Jack and start a new life. Until one night, Mary brings home a man. Jack is furious as he watches the two embrace and kiss. The lights start flickering and books fall off the shelves. When Mary came to tidy them up the next day, she saw two lines in the book that stood out. The rain was falling through the glass as usual, and he had left. After reading these lines, Mary began to remember about Jack's past. It was a romance novel that Mary and Jack often read. Every day after that, Jack was by Mary's side, and the man from that night never appeared again. Suddenly, one day, Mary wrote a note and stuffed it into a crack in the wall.
Then she took her luggage and left the place. Jack wanted to know what was written on the note. Jack started picking at the wall to find out what the note said. A man dies in a car accident. After he died, he became a ghost to stay with his beloved girlfriend, but not long after his girlfriend wrote a note and stuffed it into the wall and left the house directly. Looking at the back of Mary far away, Jack very sad. Jack wanted to know what was written on the note, ready to pick out the note in the cracks in the wall. At that moment, a ghost appeared across the street who looked exactly like Jack. Jack then realized that his love would slowly turn into waiting, but the person across the street can only wait forever, while he at least has the note in the wall. Jack wanted to know what Mary had said to him last. Jack began to crouch by the wall and desperately pick at the note, but it wasn't long before two kids came running in. They turned out to be the new tenants of the house. At night, Jack looked at the family and was a little angry at how happy they were because the house has a new owner. That means Mary will not come back. Thinking of this, Jack angrily smashed the dinner plate to the ground. The family was scared of the paranormal scene and moved out of the house. The house was called a haunted house, and once again Saturday unused. The man went to the wall and continued to pick the note in the crevice, just a little bit short. That night, a group of adventurous young people came here to have a party because here just happened a paranormal event. The young men felt very exciting to bring the girls to explore. The leading man asked the girls, "Do you believe in ghosts in the world?" Everyone began to discuss. Some said yes, some said no. The man said he believed there were ghosts in the world, but there was nothing to be afraid of. Ghosts are just the obsessions left behind by the dead during their lives. With the passage of time, whether human or ghost, this obsession will disappear. So there is no one in this world who cannot leave anyone, and no one who cannot forget who. But is this really the case? Jack does not believe. As time passed, the house eventually became a haunted house. Jack still crouched by the wall and kept snapping. Finally, in the efforts of the note was almost buckled out, but the next second an excavator instantly shoveled his house. As the excavator demolished the house, it quickly turned into ruins. The house next to him was not saved, and the ruins Jack and the ghost across the street looked at each other. The other side desperately said, "I don't think he'll ever come back." The ghost instantly lost support and turned into a puddle of white cloth. After a few more decades, Jack still did not leave, but the previous ruins have now become a towering building, which is not what Jack wants. Since Mary will not return, Jack jumped from the rooftop. After a rapid fall, Jack returned to the ground again. How can a ghost die from a fall? It's just a reincarnation. But unexpectedly, this reincarnation let Jack see the contents of the note. This is probably the most pathetic ghost you've ever seen. He waited for 100 years in the same place, just to pick out the note left by his girlfriend 100 years ago. But 100 years later, the house under his feet becomes a high-rise building. Jack finally did not see what was written on the note. He jumped from a 100-meter-high building with a broken heart, although he did not fall to his death, but the building under his feet turned into grass. At that moment, a man dressed in vintage clothes knocked on a wooden stake. It was obvious that the man was going to build a house. Jack soon realized that he was back in the past. Since it was the past, he must have been able to see the contents of the note. Not long after, the man's wife and daughter moved in. Looking at the happy family, Jack was envious. But sadly, the family died in a ride just after the house was built. Jack watched them slowly turn into white bones. Another 100 years passed. Jack still waited in the same place, finally waiting until the grass at the bottom of the hill turned into a plank. That day, a couple walked into the house. It was none other than himself and Mary before they were born. Jack watched them hug and kiss, watched them cook together, watching them laughing in the yard, watching them nestled in bed, discussing a move. A scene from the past reappeared. When Jack and Mary were so in love, Jack was watching so intensely that he accidentally touched the piano. The sudden sound makes the two of them feel scared. Jack, the boyfriend, sees Mary's fear and decides to move out of the house tomorrow. But the next day, his boyfriend died in an accident during the move, and there was a man in the house with the same white cloth. It was the same Jack in his previous life. Mary packed her bag and left. Jack rushed to the wall to pick out the note. The moment he saw the content, Jack instantly lost his obsession and turned into a puddle of white cloth. This also means the end of everything. What was written on the note we do not know, but no matter what was written, this note is only Jack does not want to face the reality of the world to stay a persistent bone. When the note opened, the moment will eventually face the reality. The obsession will also disappear, just like the other ghost said. I don't think he will ever come back. Sophie just hid in a cucumber. She was grabbed by the flesh-eating giant. The flesh-eating giant opened its mouth to gnaw the cucumber. Fortunately, the good-hearted giant found in time. He jumped up to stop the flesh-eating giant. Good-hearted giant shouted that the cucumber was out of date. The flesh-eating giant threw away the cucumber. He lifted his foot and tried to crush the cucumber. Good-hearted giant gave the soda to the carnivorous giant. The carnivorous giant left satisfied. You are a disgrace to the giant race.
good-hearted giant then places the cucumber on the table. He saw Sophie climb out safely. The good-hearted giant smiled. He picks Sophie up and opens the bucket for her to take a bath. Then good-hearted giant brought Sophie over to the fire to dry. He also found some change of clothes. The good-hearted giant laid out a nest in the tree hole and put books in it. He told Sophie to rest inside. Sophie saw the colorful bottles around her. She was amazed. So the good-hearted giant was a dream maker. He would go every night to capture beautiful dreams, and he would use a loudspeaker to blow the dreams to the sleeping children. But Sophie saw him this night. To prevent Sophie from revealing her secret, the good-hearted giant reached out his giant hand and grabbed Sophie back. He used all kinds of terrain to disguise himself along the way. He squatted on the car to avoid the car, and he disguised himself as a tree to avoid a woman. They flew across the plains, then stepped on boulders and crossed the mountains. The kind-hearted giant took Sophie directly to the land of giants. At Sophie's request, good-hearted giant agreed to take Sophie to Dream Maker with him. Outside the house, there were sleeping flesh-eating giants lying around. Good-hearted giant carefully stretched out his foot and passed over the giant's face. The giant just tried to sneeze. His nose was covered by the good-eyed giant. Good-hearted giant bends down to avoid a foot. He hooked up his purse and was about to leave, but a crow tried to chirp. The good-hearted giant reached out and made the crow to be quiet, but the giant was still woken up. The good-hearted giant tripped and fell straight to the ground. Sophie found the giant standing up. She was so scared that she started to run away. She slipped into a car and hid. After the goody-go-go-go was caught, the giant threw him out with force. Then the other giant caught him. The two giants played a game of ball tossing, but the giant felt that it was still not enough, so he picked up a small car from the side. He grabbed the good-hearted giant and went to the top of the mountain. The two giants wanted to play a game of bumper cars. One giant stepped on the car as skates. He rushed towards the truck, but Sophie was in the car. She saw the situation was not right and hit the steering wheel. The front of the car instantly turned around. The giant's legs are separated. The pain made him scream violently, caused a group of giants to laugh. At that moment, the sky was filled with dark clouds. The next second, it started to rain heavily. Because the giants were very afraid of water, they were so scared that they fled in panic. This giant held up a mini umbrella. The other one lifted a big tree, but was struck by lightning. The good-hearted giant seized the opportunity. He took Sophie with him and escaped, and one of the giants found Sophie's blanket. They instantly smelled human. The giants found the good-hearted giant's house. They started looking around. The bottle with the dream was knocked off the floor. Sophie tried to keep the giants from finding her. She rushed to the wooden ladder. She first hid in the water storage tank. Then she climbed up the water cart to the lifting platform. Sophie finally ran to the wooden hole. The giant, with his keen sense of smell, he soon found Sophie's location. The moment of truth, the good-hearted giant swung a red-hot iron bar. He stabbed the giant right in the back. Then the good-eyed giant threatened with a bucket of water. After the giant saw the water, he was scared and ran away. At that moment, Sophie saw the portrait of Queen Victoria. She suddenly thought of a bold idea. Sophie asked the good-eyed giant to create a red nightmare, and they secretly find the human Queen Victoria. The good-eye then uses a loudspeaker. He blows the nightmare into Queen Victoria's body. He made the queen dream that the missing children had been eaten by a flesh-eating giant. When Queen Victoria woke up, she saw in the newspaper that the missing children in her dream were real. Sophie took the opportunity to appear at the window. She told Queen Victoria about the giant. With Sophie's call, a giant appeared in front of Queen Victoria. The queen watched as the giant greeted her. Queen Victoria decides to invite him to dinner. The giant attends a human dinner party. The table looked like a skyscraper. Soldiers had to bring ladders to bring all kinds of food to the giant. The kind-hearted giant skewered 60 loaves of bread and added 80 fried eggs. This made him very happy to eat. To thank Queen Victoria for her hospitality, good-hearted giant shared his secret soda. This soda was so amazing that the bubbles were bubbling downwards. After everyone drank it, something magical happened. Queen Victoria believed the giant's words. She ordered her army to go to the land of giants in order to defeat the carnivorous giants. The good-hearted giant made a bottle of red nightmare. When the giants were taking a nap at noon the next day, Sophie sneaked to the center with the bottle in her arms. She was about to open the bottle, but the giant boss suddenly woke up. Sophie saw that the situation was not right and smashed the bottle on the ground. The nightmare immediately flew out into the giant's body. When the giants woke up, they all lost the ability to fight. The carnivorous giant slammed his fist into Sophie. The carnivorous giant was stopped by the kind-hearted giant in time. Sophie took the opportunity to escape, but the good-hearted giant was caught. The giant raised his fist and was about to take the good-hearted giant. The helicopter suddenly appeared and directly tied the carnivorous giant's arm, and the helicopter tripped over the giant's legs and made him fall. Soldiers were parachuted down. After their brave fight, finally the carnivorous giants were all captured. The army used helicopters to throw the giants to a desolate island. The island was surrounded by a vast ocean. The flesh-eating giants could no longer harm humans. The army then
and dropped a large number of cucumber seeds. In the future, carnivorous giants can only eat vegetarian. At the end of the movie, the good-hearted giant will continue to work to bring dreams to more people. And Sophie was adopted by Queen Victoria. She lived a happy life from then on. The boy fell into the rice bowl. He desperately struggled and shouted for help. He was scooped up by a huge spoon. The dog next to him realized something was wrong. The dog bites the father's back foot. The dog's movement made him realize something was wrong. He used a magnifying glass to see that his son had turned into the size of an ant. How did this happen? The father himself is to blame. Recently, on a whim, he wanted to invent a machine to make objects bigger and smaller, but day and night to do experiments. But the results are not always good. Every time the apple would explode into pieces. The neighbors were also frightened by the sound of the explosion several times. The neighbors even opened their windows and roared at him. On this day, the boy was playing baseball with his friends, accidentally broke the lab window. The baseball hit his father's shrinking machine and happened to activate the launch switch. With a blue light appeared, the boys were instantly shrunken into little people. When the children realized the anomaly, they were stunned. The surrounding objects became huge. The floor seemed like a chasm. Facing the screws had to jump across. The dog's barking was deafening. Several people covered their ears in pain when they saw their dad walking in. The kids hurriedly waved for help, but the mosquito-like voice the father could not hear. Dad almost trampled them into meat pies. Dad started to clean up. The children were scared and ran away. But in the end, they couldn't avoid being swept into the garbage bag. They were thrown into the yard. They cut the pocket with a shard of glass. When they pulled it open and looked outside, they were instantly dumbfounded. The small lawn in the yard had turned into a dense primeval forest. They slid along the leaves to the ground and tried to cross the grass to return home. At that moment, there was a sudden loud noise in the sky. The children hid under the mushrooms and looked. It was just a passing butterfly. The children continued on their way. Another small river blocked the way. They thought that the dog has a good sense of hearing. They thought if they could call the dog, then the dog could lead them across. So they climbed up the tall grass whistling the dog's familiar whistle. The dog heard and came running. The next moment, there was an accident. The boy suddenly and accidentally lost his hand and fell headlong into the flowers. By chance, a bee flew in. He took it as nectar and tried to pick it back. The brother rushed to jump to the rescue. As a result, the bee took him to the sky. In the yard, he started to crash and almost hit his father's face. The boy shouted for help, but his dad couldn't hear him. The father swung a baseball to try to chase away the bees. The bees dodged everywhere, and the two children were thrown away. Fortunately, no injuries. Suddenly, the father saw the broken glass. Rushing upstairs to see, found the shrinking mini sofa. He was shocked and couldn't stop talking. Realized that the children were shrunken. Quickly lying on the ground to look carefully, saw the broom on the side. I immediately felt that something was wrong. The children must have been swept out. Checked the garbage bag with a magnifying glass. Sure enough, the father found a small gap. The father knew they had entered the meadow. Fear of hurting the child, Mom hurriedly stepped on her crutches with an 8x lens to search carefully, but accidentally hooked the hose, inadvertently flipped the switch on the hose. Water immediately began to spray water. The water droplets were like cannonballs, instantly exploded in the grass. The children were so scared that they ran away. The girl did not escape, directly blown away into the puddle of water. The brother slid down in the leaves to save him. It took a lot of effort to get his sister up, but the physical exertion let the children become hungry. Just then a giant cookie came into view. The children rushed up excitedly. Take the cookie and put some cream on it. Gobbled it up. Usually not enough cookies to fill their teeth. Now there were enough for several people to eat for a whole year. As they were enjoying themselves, an ant suddenly appeared overhead, scared the people to hide. Upon observation, they found that the little ant was still underage. If they could subdue him, they could use it as a mount to send him back. Several boys tried to pounce on the ants. Finally, it was a girl who lured the ants with cookies. That's what made the ants listen. The boys rode on the ants' backs, holding a small cookie in his hand, controlling the direction. The little buddy sits right behind, all the way towards home. They didn't know their parents were hanging in the air, were looking for these children in the grass. The neighbors saw how strange they looked, leaked a ridiculous look. Then he flicked his cigarette out. It landed right next to the child. The children rushed to the scene of the smoke. They lit the torches directly with the help of cigarette butts. When they had walked all night and were exhausted, suddenly, they saw a toy building block. They wanted to use it as a hotel to rest for the night. Unexpectedly, a scorpion suddenly appeared. The scorpion waved its pincers and rushed towards the toy blocks. The boy in the toy block cried out. He was about to be eaten. Fortunately, the ants came and bit the scorpion's thigh. But in the end, the ant suffered a big loss. The ant was stung by the scorpion and lost to the scorpion on the spot. The children used wooden sticks to attack the scorpion, which finally escaped. The children looked at the ants who died for them. They shed tears of sorrow. Suddenly there was a loud noise and the ground shook. They thought there was an earthquake. It turned out to be the neighbor's children playing with a weed whacker. They ran to hide in a mouse hole, but the huge suction force from the rotating blade sucked Ogawa straight out. The crowd rushed to pull him, and finally all were sucked to the ground. At the critical moment, thanks to Dad's turning off the machine. This allowed them to avoid a disaster. Seeing their parents looking for them, the children rushed to shout for help. Although the parents didn't hear them, they heard the dog running over. The dog put its nose to the ground and the children climbed up. The dog took them straight back inside, then jumped on the table and shouted to attract the father's attention. But Ogawa slipped and fell right into the rice bowl. The father was about to eat Ogawa one bite after another. The dog rushed to bite Dad's hind leg, which made him feel very wrong. Finally, he found his son and a few other kids in the spoon. Finally, the father fixed the machine used for shrinking. The children were finally back to normal. From then on, they used the machine to expand their food to live a happy life. This is a magical storage cabinet. The boy put the toy man into it. Open again, turned into a living person. Seeing the giant-like child, scared little man cowered in the corner and hid. The boy went in dumbfounded. Where did this magical cabinet come from? It turned out to be Aikawa's birthday. His mother gave him the family cabinet. Look at the old and dilapidated appearance. No one would want it on the road, but I never thought it could bring a toy back to life. Dachuan couldn't help but be curious and reached out his palm to touch the figurine, but the little man suddenly pulled out a dagger, stabbed at Aikawa. The pain made Aikawa retract his hand. Good thing Aikawa released goodwill. This is to let the little man gradually lowered his guard. Finally, slowly out of the cabinet, active jump into the hands of Aikawa. New acquaintance with the little man friends, so that the Dachuan feel very happy. Aikawa saw that the little man was not wearing any clothes, so he began to search through the closet. He wanted to find a cozy home for the little man. As a result, Dachuan only found a toy tent for half a day. The hard plastic poles made the little man feel very uncomfortable. Aikawa suddenly had a bright idea. He put the tent into the cabinet and closed the door. Then he opened it again. In this way, the plastic tent became a linen tent. The short person happily got into the tent and went to sleep. But the boy could not sleep. He put all kinds of toys into the cabinet. The result was an amazing scene. The toys were all revived. Tyrannosaurus Rex fought Black Knight. Team America fought Iron Man. The hot scene is comparable to a war movie. See, the scene is about to get out of control. Scared, the boy quickly closed the cabinet. The toys were all changed back. Then Aikawa hid in fear under the covers. Early the next morning, sleeping Aikawa was awakened by the villain. He felt that the tent could not show his temperament. Wanted Aikawa to build a large villa. Aikawa readily agreed. With a small little man came to the yard. For the miniature man, everything here became huge. The boy was preparing to build tools when a crow suddenly flew over, trying to eat the little man as a bug. The little man's leg was injured. He hurriedly took out the medical soldier toy and put it inside. Once the door was closed and open, the medic instantly came to life. The boy threw the medical soldier to the little man. Let the medical soldier help the little man treatment bandage. Aikawa also took a magnifying glass, curious to watch. Fortunately, the little man is only a superficial injury. It didn't take long for the medic to heal. Aikawa wanted the medic to stay for medical treatment, but he said he did not belong to this world. Aikawa had to put him in the cabinet, let it become a toy again. One day Aikawa came home from school. He found that the little man had built a villa. Worried that he would feel lonely alone, so he took out a toy. Old man wanted to resurrect the little man as a companion, but after the old man came back to life, seeing the huge human head in front of him, scared on the spot, fell to the ground and did not breathe. This made the little man very sad. He wanted to be buried according to the custom, so Aikawa wrapped him in cloth and buried him in the back garden and buried him in her. Then he wrote an essay about his experience. He read them to his classmates at school. The richness of his imagination, the teacher couldn't help but praise the writing very well. The teacher said not to write it next time. Dachuan's classmate Xiao Shuai, but half-heartedly, so Dachuan took Xiao Shuai back home. Dachuan also told Xiao Shuai this secret. Xiao Shuai heard that the locker was a resurrection toy. She took advantage of Dachuan left, surreptitiously put the western cowboy inside. The next second, Shuai opened the locker. The cowboy suddenly rode out on his horse, but because the cowboy had been drinking, a slip of the tongue and fell off the horse. Little Handsome was curious to stare at the cowboy, but unexpectedly caused the cowboy's displeasure. The cowboy pulled out a pistol and shot the little marshal in the head. Fortunately, the bullet was not too powerful, just stuck in the face. Dachuan helped Xiao Shuai squeeze out the bullet. Saw another villain approaching. The drunken cowboy tried to shoot. Fortunately, Aikawa caught him just in time, then put him in a drawer to sober him up. Aikawa also promised that little Marshall would restore his toy. Unexpectedly, the next day, the cowboy escaped with his shoelaces. After the boy woke up from a nap, he saw two little men fighting on the floor. The cowboy hides behind his shoe and shoots. The other villain fought back with a bow and arrow. This move scared off the cowboy's horse. The fight was getting intense. Aikawa sees the scene and rushes to stop it. Aikawa was worried that the villain would continue to fight after he went to school, so he hid the two in his school bag and took them to school together. Unexpectedly, Xiao Shui learned that Aikawa had brought the villain. He wanted to show his classmates to show them. Nachwan rushed to stop them and pushed Xiao Shui. This scene was just seen by the teacher. The teacher asked the two what was going on. After the teacher found out that they were fighting for toys, asked to check the bag on the spot. This made Aikawa very worried. He was worried that the little man had been confiscated by the teacher. Fortunately, the little man pretended to be a toy and didn't move. They escaped like that. In the evening, they watched TV. They saw a movie about cowboys invading the Aborigines. The little people saw that the natives were surrounded. They were in a frenzy on the spot. He grabbed his bow and arrows to help his people, but the cowboy was excited and fired a shot. Another little man immediately turned and shot his bow and arrow and saw that the cowboy was seriously wounded on the spot. Aikawa was scared and turned off the TV. It was only then that the little man who shot the arrow realized. It turned out that it was all a lie. He rushed to check the cowboy's injury, pulled out the bow and arrow, saw the cowboy was bleeding. Aikawa hurriedly used the cabinet to save him. The doctor promptly treated the cowboy's wound and gave him a shot. The doctor saved the cowboy's life by resuscitating him. The little man also realized his mistake. Left tears of remorse, Aikawa wanted to bring a villain girl back to life but was stopped by the little man. Aikawa finally understood at that moment. They all have their own world and not confined to it. So the next day, Aikawa said goodbye to the cowboy and the little people, put them back in the cabinet and turned them back into toys. So the question arises, if you get this magical cabinet, what will come back to life? This teacher was accidentally shrunk. She was strapped into a pencil case by a student. The student asked the teacher to help him cheat on the test. If the teacher does not obey, the boy scares her with a giant cat. He also used the teacher as a target to practice darts. The teacher was so pathetic, she couldn't stand it anymore. She finally escaped from the school bag, but she fell to the ground. The teacher touched her head, but there was gum stuck to the top of her head. Suddenly, the teacher felt a pain in her stomach. She looked for the toilet in a hurry, but the toilet was too high. The teacher felt very anxious. Fortunately, there was a potted plant in front of her. The teacher happily hid behind the tree to use the toilet, but the next moment, the man moved the potted plant up. He spilled water on himself. Why did the teacher turn into a miniature man? This is because the boy, Felix, was too naughty, so he changed schools more than 10 times and was expelled. This day, his father took Felix to the new school. As a result, Felix was late for his first day of school. He was severely criticized by the principal. The principal is also Felix's homeroom teacher. This was a shock to Felix. The students are afraid of the class teacher. Felix tried to fit in with the class. He wants to join Eric's team. Eric wanted to test Felix's courage. Eric asked him to venture into the old classroom. At night, Felix came to the classroom with a flashlight. He didn't notice that the portrait of the old principal was moving. When Felix was ready to leave, but the teacher suddenly appeared. She treats Felix like a thief and says she will expel him. Felix closed his eyes in despair. He mumbled something about wishing the teacher would disappear. At that moment, the magic ball suddenly spun. Then flames emerged. Suddenly there was a flash of blue light. When Felix opened his eyes, the teacher really disappeared. It turned out that the teacher was shrunk into a miniature person. She was almost trampled by Felix. The teacher kept dodging the giant feet. Finally, she decided to get into the book bag, and so the teacher was brought home by Felix. The next morning, Felix was awakened by the alarm bell. Dazed, he opened his eyes and saw a magical scene. He found the teacher standing on the table, and the teacher turned out to be as small as a toy doll. The teacher said she felt very hungry, so Felix took the teacher to the kitchen. He was going to make a delicious breakfast. The teacher turned into a miniature man. She was thrown into the cream by the students. Felix tried to keep his dad from finding out. He also covered the slices of bread, but Dad grabbed a knife.
No, I'm taking skateboarding.
The teacher was furious. She told Felix to turn himself into a normal person, otherwise she would expel Felix. The teacher's arrogant attitude angered Felix. Felix threw the teacher into the trash, but then he saw the garbage truck in front of him. He began to worry about the teacher's safety again, so Felix picked up the teacher from the garbage can again. In order to make the teacher happy, Felix not only helped her to wash her clothes, he also went to the toy doll store to buy clothes to apologize to the teacher. But then his classmate Ella suddenly appeared. The teacher had to pretend to be a toy. On the way home, Felix accidentally fell down and crushed his school bag. He rushed to pull out the teacher. He found the teacher in a very bad condition. Felix was so scared that he poured mineral water over her in a hurry. The teacher finally woke up, but this scene was just seen by Ella. She exclaimed that the teacher was so cute. She also thoughtfully helped the teacher to stop the nosebleed in order to get a good score in the exam. Felix suddenly came up with a daring plan. He asked the teacher to help him cheat, and in exchange, Felix would help the teacher become normal again. The teacher could only agree to this unreasonable request. Eric saw that Felix was very fast at answering questions, so he asked Felix to help him write together. As a result,
when the teacher announced the test results the next day. Felix and Eric both got a 0. It turned out that the teacher had given the wrong answers. She wanted to warn Felix that cheating was wrong. Eric was very angry about the results. He wanted to teach Felix a lesson. Then he went through Felix's book bag. Eric wanted to know how Felix had cheated, and he found the teacher. The teacher rushed to disguise as a toy doll, and the teacher did not dare to move. Although the teacher disguise is very successful, but the teacher was still Eric brought home. Only the kid suddenly appeared. Scared, the teacher did not continue to disguise. Normally, Eric was often criticized by the teacher. At this point, his face suddenly showed a bad smile. The student pinned the teacher to the target and practice starts directly. The teacher was terrified. She tells Eric not to continue, but Eric doesn't want to let the teacher go. Luckily, Felix and Ella come looking for teacher. Ella distracts Eric at the door. Felix slipped in and rescued the teacher. Then he ran to the school. The director was in a meeting at the school. He wanted to sell the school for profit on the grounds that there were not enough students. Luckily, Felix arrives just in time. He took out the enrollment papers and gave them to the director. As long as the number of students was added to Felix's, the number of students enrolled would meet the standard. But the director just took one look at the paperwork. He said the signature was a forgery. Finally, the director directly tore the document into pieces. This was because the teacher was holding a huge pencil. She couldn't sign her name properly. In order to stop the director's plan, Felix took the teacher to the old classroom. He wanted to turn the teacher back into a normal person, but Felix recited the incantation to the portrait for half a day, but there was no response. At this time, the director also arrived here. The unexpected thing appeared. The magic ball suddenly spun up. With a burst of fire, the director also became a miniature man. The next second, the ground suddenly collapsed. Two people let out a scream. They fell directly into the darkness of the ground. Not long after, they came to a basement. The director lit the lighter to see. In front of them was a fierce black cat. The two men were terrified. They almost got eaten by the black cat. The director used the lighter to ignite the gasoline to scare the cat away. After the students found the entrance to the basement, they rushed into the pipe. The students arrived at the underground classroom filled with models, but the door here was locked and they couldn't get through. Suddenly, the lights flickered on and off, finally stopping at the Eiffel Tower. Felix rushed to the globe. He pressed the position of France directly. Finally opened the door to see the teacher in danger. The students rushed to put out the flames with their clothes. And the end of the movie, the teacher and the director of the portrait to say that they will teach the students well. With a flash of light, the two finally returned to normal. From then on, the students not only can learn happily, they also opened a happy school live. How many aliens are disguised as humans in the crowd? This 1988 science fiction horror film. It uses extremely witty footage to illustrate reality to the audience. It takes place in the near future. The U.S. economy is in deep recession. It is the dream of most people to find a secure job. Nada, who works on a construction site, doesn't have a house. The slum where he lives is also surrounded by heavily armed city police. They forcibly evicted the refugees and razed the slum to the ground. The next day, Nana was searching for supplies. He noticed something strange about the wooden walls. He kicked open the boards and took out a small box from inside. Then he went to a remote place. He found the box filled with sunglasses. He picked up a pair of glasses and looked at them carefully and felt a little strange. So he hid the rest of the sunglasses. Nana went out into the street. He put on the sunglasses and saw a very strange image. Various posters had been turned into different brainwashing slogans. The books sold in the newspaper stores on the roadside were also the same. Nana was horrified that the old man had turned into an alien. He took off his sunglasses, and the old man turned back into a human. Nana thought he was mistaken. He continued walking down the street. He found that the high-end customers of the barbershop were all scary aliens, but the customers were served by ordinary people. Nana was confused and went into a high-end supermarket. The scene inside made him feel even more scared. The salesman didn't know that the customers in front of him were not human. Nana spoke to an old lady who asked for help. He shouted that she was ugly. The woman was surprised to find out her identity. This man was able to discover her true identity. She immediately reported the man with her phone watch. The aliens in the vicinity gradually approached Nana. There were too many of them, so Nana had to leave first. As soon as he left the house, he was surrounded by the police, just Nana had expected. The policeman was also infiltrated by the aliens. He punched the alien and knocked him over. Then he grabbed the weapon and killed them. Nana ran into a bank to escape from the chase. However, he was shot by the image before him. The entire lobby, except for the staff, most of the customers in line were aliens. The alien security guard opened fire directly. Nada didn't hesitate anymore and started to fight back frantically. One alien was about to send a message to his companion. Nada raises his gun and aims it at him. The alien suddenly disappeared. Soon a large number of alien police arrived. Nada rushes to escape through the back door. In the process of escaping, he took a woman named Holly hostage. Nada told Holly that if she put on these sunglasses, she could see the aliens disguised as humans. When she heard Nada's words,
aliens. Holly was very calm. She tells Nada that she works in a TV station. She might be able to help Nada spread the message. Nada thinks it's a great idea, but Nada didn't know the danger that was about to happen. Nada fell from a height. Surprisingly, he only suffered minor injuries, but the sunglasses fell at Holly's house. Nada went back to the construction site to ask his friend Frank for help, but Frank didn't believe Nada. He didn't want to be associated with a wanted criminal either. Nada tried to prove he wasn't lying. He found the hidden sunglasses in the dumpster. Frank happened to be passing by. Nada told him to put on the sunglasses, but Frank didn't want to wear the sunglasses. There was a fierce fight between them. Frank didn't beat Nada. He was forced to put on his sunglasses. Instantly, the image in front of his eyes changed rapidly. Aliens coming and going on the street. This completely overturned Frank's perception. The two of them hide in a hotel to discuss their next plan. Nada thinks that maybe if they find the person who made the sunglasses, they will be able to uncover the aliens' conspiracy. Suddenly, a mysterious old man enters the room. He pulls out a note. He reminds them that they must attend the gathering tonight. At 12 midnight, Nada and Frank attend the meeting as promised. They use their sunglasses to see that there are no aliens here. The administrator replaced their contact lenses with more advanced ones. They were also given a large number of weapons and alien watches. The old man told them important information. The Earth has been completely infiltrated by aliens. They have taken control of all industries. Many humans join the alien team for profit. Others have formed a resistance army. They have been looking for a chance to overthrow the aliens' rule. But before they can do so, they had to destroy the radio that the aliens used to control the humans. That's when a voice came. She said she knew exactly where the radio was. It was Holly who spoke. She was using the sunglasses Nada left behind. She had discovered the presence of the aliens. Before she can continue talking, an accident occurs. The last stronghold of the human resistance was discovered by the aliens. They send a large number of men into a frenzied siege. The resistance instantly suffers heavy casualties. Nada and Frank are surrounded. At the critical moment, Frank pulls out the alien's watch. He activated it and dropped it on the ground. A tunnel suddenly appeared. When they enter, the tunnel closes. At the end of the corridor, there was a faint sound of noise. The two of them then came to a spacious banquet hall. It was filled with a large number of aliens and human traders. They were discussing how to divide up the Earth. A drunk uncle thinks Nada and Frank are guests. He also invites them to visit the base. Alien technology is highly advanced. Not only are there FTL portals here, there's also a signal transmission center that controls human minds. Now they can complete their plan. Nada and his team decide to overthrow the aliens. The aliens are caught off guard by the sudden attack. The two men make their way to the roof of the building. They were going to destroy the signal transmitter, and they save Holly. Nada will scout the way and Frank will take cover. And then something unexpected happened. Holly took out her gun and killed Frank, and Nada had reached the roof. He was about to destroy the launcher. Behind him, Holly threatened Nada with a gun. Nada finally found out the truth. Holly had betrayed the human race. She is also the one who destroyed the resistance stronghold. Nada saw the situation now. Nada fired directly at Holly. He then completely destroyed the transmitter, and Nada was killed by the arriving aliens. The humans were out of radio control. Ordinary people could also see the aliens in the crowd. As long as the human race is united, the invaders will soon be driven off the planet. This woman is being watched by the devil. She had just stepped out of the bathroom. There was a knock on the door. There was nothing outside. A second knock on the door continued. This time she opened the door. The corridor outside was empty. The woman thought it was a prank. Unbeknownst to her, the demon had already sneaked into her room. When she returned to her room, tragedy struck. The woman tied a hemostatic bag to the air out of thin air and then sprayed with an unknown blue liquid. A few light taps, a blood vessel will quickly bulge. Then, with a very thick syringe to inject a red liquid. The next second, the red liquid began to spread slowly and rapidly. First, it reaches the heart, then slowly flow to the limbs until it spreads all over the body. Then a miraculous scene happened. A gorilla suddenly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. It turns out that this laboratory stealth animal restoration experiments are being conducted in secret, and the military's ultimate goal is to develop human invisibility technology so as to create an invisible army. But technically speaking, it's easier to be invisible than to be visible. The animals in the cages were their experiments. Invisibility has not been restored. Even daily care has to wear thermal goggles to see. Science geek Kane is the head of this project. Kane has a quirk. He likes to peep at the female neighbor across the street to take a shower. The curtains would be closed at every crucial moment. Kane was very distressed, but then came the inspiration, and so he broke through the restoration technique. Kane invented the restoration technique and succeeded in recovering the gorilla. But when he reported the progress of the experiment to the military, Kane deliberately concealed it. Kane didn't want to give away his research.
They know that we've completed the circle. What is to stop them from taking over the project completely?
Why would they do that?
Because they won't need us anymore.
But it's their project, Sebastian. It's gonna happen sometime.
Maybe their project, but it's my dream, it's my vision.
This one he actually offered to do human experimentation directly. He even volunteered to be a guinea pig. He injected the invisibility agent into himself. He is really confident. Immediately afterwards, with a painful wailing sound, the skin on his body began to gradually disappear, then slowly turned into a skeleton until completely transparent. Just like that, Kane became the world's first invisible man. In order to collect enough experimental data, his invisible state needs to be maintained for 3 days. But during those 3 days, Kane's true nature was revealed. He sneaked into the duty room late at night. First, he stroked the hair of a female colleague, then he started to make advances. Only when the woman woke up did he sneak back in. The next day, the woman told other colleagues about the incident, but because there is no evidence, people can only stop. Colleagues did not say anything on the surface, but inside, they have felt fear of being dominated by the invisible man. To go to the bathroom, female colleagues have to wear thermal goggles to feel at ease. Kane is even more reckless in front of Linda, just because Linda is his ex-girlfriend. But the good news is that 3 days are fast approaching. Soon came the day of restoration, but not only did he not return to normal after the injection, and almost met God, no choice but to let Kane's invisible state can only be maintained for a while. But his colleagues made him a rubber membrane. Although his appearance was a little ugly, but at least he had a human form. The colleagues were no longer in fear. But in the following days, again and again, the restoration experiments Kane tormented enough. She was on the verge of a psychological breakdown. Kane could not stand being locked up in the laboratory all the time, so he ignored his colleagues. He went straight home. The colleagues saw that something was wrong and immediately informed the others. On the other hand, when he got home, Kane was much more relaxed. When he was ready to pack his things and go back to the lab, but suddenly saw the familiar image of the opposite side. But the curtains were still blocking the image as usual. But this time, Kane had a terrible idea. Kane, as a physically transparent person without the restraints of law and morality. Then a sick thought came to Kane. This woman's doorbell kept ringing. The woman opened the door, but the hallway was empty. The woman thought it was a prank, not realizing that a transparent person had slipped in. When she enters the house again, tragedy strikes. This girl was violated. On the other hand, Linda is at Kane's house. She found the hood and clothes that were taken off. Linda senses that something is wrong, and she immediately rushes back to the lab. At the same time, Kane just left the woman's home. In the laboratory, everyone is ready for the hot test mirror and anesthesia gun. Prepare for the unexpected. Kane appears out of nowhere. He lied and said he just went home to get something. Naturally, his colleagues do not believe Kane and warn him. But
if you leave the compound again, I swear I'll go straight to the committee.
When another colleague asked him what it was like to sneak out, Kane said smugly, "I liked it." Kane, having tasted the sweetness, was not willing to be trapped as a guinea pig once again. Kane looked at the heat-sensitive camera watching him, and he immediately had a plan. He let the camera loop the image of himself lying in bed. Then Kane sneaks over to his colleague Linda's house. Instead, Kane accidentally finds Linda and her colleague's assistant Matt. They are together. Kane was so angry that he smashed the glass of Linda's house and back to the laboratory to use the dog to vent anger. And Linda thinks it all has something to do with Kane. He suspected that Kane was behind the scenes. It turns out Linda's suspicions were correct. Linda felt her suspicions were unsubstantiated, so she immediately went back to the lab. Sure enough, the surveillance showed he was there, but the bed was empty. After Linda figured out that Kane was switching videos, Linda then realized the seriousness of the matter, so announced in public to report the matter to the military. But Kane was there to hear everything. He followed Linda to the colonel's home, only to find that Linda was smart this time. He blocked the doorway with a table, blocking the way. Kane took one look at the pool next to him. A terrible thought occurred to him. When Linda and the others had left, the colonel was about to inform the others, but the phone line had been disconnected by Kane. At this moment, the colonel did not realize the seriousness of the matter. He just instinctively went to the backyard to check. Little did he know that danger was approaching. The old man was about to die. He was pushed into the water by that one transparent person. He drowned alive in his own pool. The invisible Kane, in order not to let others know the existence of his invisible man, he decided to kill all his colleagues. Linda and Matt, who didn't know, were anxiously waiting for news from their superiors. But in the end, all they got was the death of their superiors. Something is not right. Linda is about to ask for further confirmation when she finds that the phone signal is suddenly cut off. Linda tries to call the police, but the password to the security system has been changed. Everyone is trapped in the lab. They were lambs to the slaughter. Faced with the invisible man, they decided to act as a team. The odds of winning would be much better this way. This colleague was just a step too late. and he was killed. In order to avenge their colleague, they decided to strike first. First, they used the mobile hot room monitor to find Kane's location. Then we sent two people to capture him. Linda was responsible for checking Kane's condition at all times, but once Kane stopped moving, the monitor will be useless. As a result, one of the colleagues was attacked. Seeing that Matt was no match for Kane, several people decided to split up to save others. At the critical moment, Linda saved Matt, but the other colleagues are in trouble. Matt tried to save the others, but accidentally became seriously injured himself. Kane locked the two in the freezer and turned the temperature to the lowest, ready to freeze them alive. At this point, Kane has completely lost control. In order to put an end to the problem, he decided to blow up the laboratory, destroy all the evidence. But what he didn't expect was that Linda used the handle and wire to make a solenoid successfully unlock the door. After settling Matt, he grabbed his oxygen tank and went to settle the score with Kane. Kane had set the time bomb and was about to escape. At this time, Linda chased after him and did not talk to Kane, directly set fire to Kane. At this time, Kane is already covered in flames, but he did not panic, quickly took off his holster and once again invisible. Linda used the last bit of firepower to turn on the sprinklers. Finally, Kane shows up, but Linda herself was attacked. Then Kane was ready to trample Xiaomei alive. In the nick of time, Matt came to the rescue. He knocked Kane out with a blow. The two were ready to escape. Kane woke up and tried to attack from behind, but Matt dodged the attack. The iron bar hit the electric box. The two men took advantage of the moment when Kane was electrocuted, climbing out of the elevator shaft with the ladder. As the bomb countdown ended, Kane finally had his own fate and was buried in the fire. Linda and Matt escaped in this way. Imagine if a person had the ability to be invisible and no moral restraints. That's horrible. What do you think?